So welcome. Thanks for coming, everybody. My name is Elena Christopher. I'm a Senior Vice President here at HFS Research. Thank you for deciding to spend an hour of your time with us today. We hope to make it worth your while. Our topic for today is the rise of attended automation, how to get it right. HFS, and we'll share with you some of our latest and greatest data, but we've been a firm that's really been at the forefront of both really even creating and tracking the rise and expansion of the automation market. We realize there's just a great need for enhanced specificity about what flavor, what type of automation that we're talking about, so that enterprises can get the optimal results. So we're going to go deep on that today. I am joined by just an absolutely fabulous cast of panelists today. We've got OP Financial Group is going to share the enterprise perspective. NICE from their Advanced Process Automation Group is going to talk with us and represent the vendor software view today. And I've brought in some analyst reinforcements from HFS. But I'd love for each of my panelists to briefly introduce themselves. Jukka, let's go over to you, please. Name, rank, and serial number.
Hello, and thanks, Elena. I'm Jukka Moilanen, and I'm the product owner of robotics here at OP Financial Group.
Super, welcome. Oded, let's go over to you, please.
Yeah, thanks, Elena. Oded Karev, General Manager for NICE Advanced Process Automation line of business. So practically the CEO of anything that is RPA within NICE. Been doing that for 5 years now and excited to be here.
Super, thank you, Oded, welcome. And last but not least, Melissa, over to you, please.
Yes, hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon. This is Melissa O'Brien. I'm Vice President here at HFS and I lead all of our customer engagement focused research. So very happy to be on the panel.
Super, thanks folks. So a little bit of housekeeping. So in order to make the best use of the time, we're not going to take live questions from our audience, but we really want to hear from you. So I would draw everyone's attention to the bottom of your screen. You should see a menu that has a Q&A box on it. Please use that to submit your questions. We will be monitoring these real time. We'll try and if you submit something and it's tied to directly to what we're talking about, we'll try and work it in as we go. Otherwise, we will leave roughly 5 to 7 minutes to the end of the session to try and address these questions. But let's get on to content. So what we're planning to cover today, we'll do this in 3 parts. First and foremost, we'll do a bit of market context. So I'm going to go ahead and share some of our latest and greatest research, talking about where we are and then the future of the automation marketplace. So we'll dive into that in just a moment. And then we'll toggle over to the interview and enterprise insights portion of our webinar today. As I mentioned, we've got Jukka Moilanen from OP Financial Group. He leading their program there at the largest financial services group in Finland. They're living and breathing an attended and unattended automation duality. So we'll get into a bit about what does that mean and why it's important. With some color commentary from NICE as their attended automation technology partner, and some great insights from Melissa O'Brien, who's our lead at HFS for front office, customer experience, and contact center. Some of the themes that we hope to touch on today throughout our discussion is, I mentioned in my introductory comments, there's a need to get a bit more specific about automation. It's become this very broad term, and we think that there needs to be some greater specificity because these different flavors of automation are almost directly tied to different tooling, if you will, and different opportunities to expand the aperture and expand the value and benefits of your automation program. So a really necessary focus. So and that's why we'll take the time to talk about this today. And we also want to talk about one of the interesting things about attended automation is because it's desktop oriented, it's used so closely by so many different practitioners, like contact center agents, for example. And so we really want to talk about that link between unleashing your humans, so to speak. There's been somewhat of one of the clouds within the automation space has been that it takes away jobs, and there's been the rise of automation anxiety. But in the realm of attended automation, it's actually very complementary. So we want to crack that theme open and go deep there. And we also think that there needs to be some broader discourse on what's the difference between attended and unattended automation. There are definitely similarities, but there's also some really important differences. So we'll do our best to crack those themes open today and some others, as well as get to some of that Q&A I mentioned at the end. Briefly, we're hoping if you're deciding to spend some time with us today, you've got some familiarity about HFS research, but I'll take just a moment to give you a quick snapshot. The things that we'd like you to know about HFS is that we're a boutique market research firm. We've been around for 10 years. We're headquartered out of Cambridge, England, but we have a global footprint. We were originally spun out of our CEO and founder, and he's also still our chief analyst, Phil First, from a blog that he founded in the early 2000s, which was called, wait for it, because it's the secret as to what HFS stands for. He founded a blog called Horses for Sources that was all about the outsourcing industry, a play off the English phrase horses for courses, or the right tool for the job. But the blog was all about how outsourcing was a viable lever, an increasingly viable lever for many enterprises who were seeking to start to drive business transformation or even digital transformation within their enterprises. After getting such a hearty reception to the blog and the insights that he was putting out there, he decided to fashion it into a company, and HFS, the research company, was born. Our background was very much focused on IT and business process services, but we've expanded that over time, very much in alignment with what's always been our core guiding principle, which is how can we best help enterprises identify the levers that will be most impactful for them, whether it be working with IT and business process service providers, or, as is the topic of conversation today, making good use of a variety of emerging tech there. And above all, we're always looking to really separate the hype from the reality. What can you really get done here? And I think the other relevant thing to know about HFS, part of what Phil's original vision was, and it's something that we stayed very true to through to the current day, is that we're somewhat the open source research house in the marketplace, in that we always believe that to have interesting conversations, to have access to the different actors in the marketplace that we wanted to have access to start those interesting conversations and to provide insights as to future directions. We needed conversation starters. So we've always been big believers that we should provide some of our research on a complimentary basis. And so I jokingly say, or truly, for the low, low price of your corporate email ID, we still provide about 50% of all HFS research on a complimentary basis. And so because of that, and also because we've been a digital business since inception, it means we've got a very substantial readership base. So for those of you that are already HFS subscribers, thank you. For those of you who are not, I recommend that you dive in and share your corporate email ID with us, and we'd love to share interesting content with you. So that's HFS. Diving into some of the more to the theme of today. Back in 2012, Phil First, our again CEO, chief analyst, founder, he put out a seminal blog that we affectionately called Greetings from Robotistan. But it was essentially our firm's recognition of this powerful new technology that was coming out called, at that time, we called robotic automation. And it was essentially through our getting to know Blue Prism that got us into tracking automation, and was one of the first technology levers that we really strongly looked at, and we continue to expand from there. One of our claims to fame back in the day is that HFS, we actually put the P in RPA. Blue Prism was calling it process automation, as indicated in this 2012 blog. And as legend has it, Phil and the former CEO of Blue Prism, Alistair Bathgate, in the then Blue Prism headquarters, which we think was in the basement of a pub, perhaps, put their heads together and decided, you know what, we really need to talk about what's being automated. So process was entered into the equation. So that was back in 2012. So we definitely were one of the first firms to really identify the trend in process automation. and continue to be, because you never want to rest on your laurels. So continue to try and really push the envelope as to where the market's going. And so with that in mind, in 2019, we put out a blog, myself now in the mix here, Phil and our Chief Research Officer, Saurabh Gupta, we put out a piece called RPA is Dead, Long Live Integrated Automation Platforms. Now, clearly, this today is a session about RPA. So I'll make the point that what we were trying to convey with this blog is that RPA, it's obviously still very much alive as a software category, but we were getting very tired of so much of the hype that we were hearing about all the magnificent things that RPA could do. Let me be very clear, it's a very, very powerful and useful tool, or else we wouldn't waste your time with a webinar on it. But our overarching point was to do things that are transformative, you need to have an array of tools in your toolkit to help you optimize what your benefits are. And that's our concept of integrated automation. And then that brings us to today. This is a statement that Phil put out a couple of weeks ago, but as we continue to contemplate where the automation market is going and what its role is within enterprises around the world, it's very much informed by everyone's current pandemic circumstance, which is the forced change that the pandemic has brought upon us, sort of the making everyone go digital and virtual, whether you wanted to or not. It's really forced a lot of change. We think of it as almost recontextualizing digital, but it's also shined a very strong light on automation and the role that it can play within enterprises. And so our view at this point is that the mission for automation within your enterprise is to make it native. And what we mean by that is that it increasingly becomes a standard part of how you operate, how your employees get their work done, how your customers engage with you, how your partners interact with you. Automation needs to become native. Automation is not your strategy. Your strategy, as it says at the bottom of this slide, is what your business is all about. It's what you're striving towards to make sure you've got the right tools and enablers to stay ahead of your competitors and make smart decisions. And in that regard, automation is an enabler. And I'll show you this very briefly. Back in 2016, HFS put out what we call our one office model. The reason the one office model is relevant to our conversation today is because this was always our stake in the ground as to what's the destination for the digitally transformed enterprise. We felt it was honestly our responsibility as a research organization talking about enterprises who were engaged in transformation to try and give them some sense of where are you going and what might you look like if you get there. And by the way, let me be clear, we do not think that digital transformation is a singular destination. It's very organic and it's ongoing because change is perpetual. But this is our stake in the ground as to what some of the elements are of organizations that are on the digital transformation journey. And our whole concept of the one office is that what emerging technologies enable you and your enterprises to do is to break down many of the silos, many of the odd processes, address a lot of the technical debt that limits you from having the very best interactions, from making the very best decisions and such. So you break down the multiple silos to create, you break down the front office, the middle office to create the only office that matters, which is the one office. So that's the HFS vision for the future of digital transformation. And as I mentioned, automation, as we're striving to make it native, it has a very important role to become native and embedded in many of those reborn processes that I just mentioned. So we'll take just a moment to describe terminology, if you will. We have observed that one of the challenges in the marketplace is that RPA has evolved almost as the umbrella term, but then it's also a subcategory, driving lots of confusion. So we'll do, and this is the public service announcement portion of our webinar today, but just to be clear about definitions, we've got within the umbrella of RPA, or perhaps we should call it broader process automation, which is what we're leaning towards these days. You have RDA, robotic desktop automation. This is essentially attended automation. It's automation that sits on user desktops and is triggered by humans, as opposed to RPA, which is typically unattended, but that uses the predefined business rules, and it runs without human intervention, often sitting on servers, utilizing the orchestrators to schedule when things are going to run. So there are two different flavors of automation, but there's been a lot of confusion about which is which. A couple of sources of those confusion are this first blue box that I'm bringing up. Because the reality is that when we analyze where enterprises are spending their money today, it is on unattended automation. By our count, roughly about 75% of all money spent on RPA software today is specific to unattended automation. So enterprises who are investing in automation, process automation, is heavily focused on unattended. The other thing that we find confuses folks is that because of the nature of attended automation, that it's desktop based and it tends to work with users, that's the human trigger, you tend to have a lot more of the so-called bots for attended automation than you do for unattended automation. But there was a bit of a trend in the market where folks were using bot counts to talk about how scaled their programs were, which was very confusing, just because inherently you will always have more attended bots than you will unattended bots. And so we found they tend to, for engagements, attended bots tend to outweigh attended by often 10-to-1 ratios. I've seen them even higher. So just want to make sure that we've got a firm baseline on what we're talking about. Today we'll contemplate, we'll overarchingly focus on attended, but we'll also look at the duality between the two because it's quite relevant in the case of the OP Financial Group. All right, just a little bit more data and then we'll get on to the interview and conversation portion here. Just want to give you a quick pre-pandemic baseline. So part of why it's so relevant to be talking about attended automation today is because before we came into pandemic circumstance, our data showed that the achieved scale of process automation was at a very anemic 13% or so. There's lots and lots of reasons for that. Part of some of the challenge that comes with being a business-led initiative is that you may not always have the necessary IT participation, and it can sometimes strand you within certain business units. So that's one of, I think, probably the many challenges that RPA programs have faced. But as I showed you before, so much of the focus on RPA has been on attended. Part of the conversation, and thus the relevance of including attended in the mix, is that it's almost bringing another tool or another facet to the conversation that helps make RPA, in this case, in the broadest sense, more broadly applicable within your enterprise. So it lends itself to the scale story. I'll share this with you as well. So some of the research that we've been doing during the pandemic, we did a study. We tend to do a study or two in partnership with KPMG each year. And so we did one this year focused on emerging technology. And our first tranche of data collection finished right in the sort of late March timeframe, just at least in the US, but certainly in Europe as well. We were all really going into initial pandemic lockdowns. And so we said, okay, well, this data is useful, but we think a lot's going to change. So let's complement it with another tranche. So we complemented the initial sample of 600 that we did with an additional 300 enterprises. And some of the things that we asked about for use of emerging technologies was, what were your top reasons for using the tech in the first place? And so you see process automation went from some of the very familiar reasons that we've used process automation: cost reduction, maybe it'll help improve our brand value, even tying it to top line growth. I mean, and those are great benefits in its own right. But what was very interesting is that how much things have shifted now in pandemic operating circumstance, which, no pressure, but we've now got a lot of this tech as being essential for future survival. And not to be too whimsical about it, but that, although I suppose there's nothing whimsical about future survival, but I suppose what I mean is not to be trite about it, but part of why there's this real push for these types of emerging technologies to become so essential to organizations is directly linked to striving to digitally enable them or digitally transform them. To use the language I used earlier in the conversation today, it's all about making, in this case, process automation, making process automation native to how you run your business today. And then last but not least, and then we'll move on to going deep on attended, one of the other things that we're learning about what things will change forever as impacted by the pandemic is our varied how we do work. So I'll speak for myself. I'm sitting in my home office still, as I've been for many, many months, as I suspect many of you are today. When we talk with enterprises about if they're going back to how we used to do it, at this point, our latest study has shown only about 37% say they'll return to the office-based work style of the past. I'm sure nothing's going to be pure black or white, and it will be somewhat of a hybrid style that emerges. But when we contemplate how each of us as workers want to be more productive, or think of it in the context of one of the most enduring attended automation use cases, contact center workers, how can you make those contact center workers more productive? How can you make any of us more productive? And it brings us in a pretty direct trajectory to some of the role that attended automation can have on the fundamental ways in which we actually do work. All right, so that was a bit of HFS, our latest and greatest research and context. I'd love to toggle over now and have a bit of a conversation. And so Yuka, I'd love to go to you first, which is, let's talk a bit about you and your organization. We'd love to know a bit more about OP Financial Group, about you and your role and how it supports your organization.
Yeah, sure. So OP Financial Group, we are the largest financial services group in Finland. And in addition to the more traditional financial industry areas of banking, wealth management, and insurance, we also operate in other areas such as the healthcare industry. So that also means that we have a huge variety of different processes to consider with regards to automation. We are a cooperative financial group, so we are owned by our over 140 group bank members, who again are owned by our over 2 million owner customers. And in addition to Finland, we operate in the Baltic states as well. And you wanted to know a bit about my role at OP. So I'm the product owner of robotics, and as such, I'm responsible for the robotic process automation, as well as robotic desktop automation or attended automation, whatever you want to call it, in OP. I work with over 60 people in our process automation center of excellence, and we as an organization are responsible for offering process automation services for all of OP's business areas. So we kind of serve as the one-stop shop for all of our process automation needs. So we manage the platforms, develop the best practices, manage resources for analysis and development, and manage the operation of the processes. So we are basically able to serve our business areas from beginning to end. So the end-to-end process is managed by us, and we act as the hub of automation.
Super, thank you for that detailed introduction, Yuka. You've got a couple of interesting themes there. We'll come back to your role in just a moment. The piece I want to pick up on now, and I think we see it on, right in your headline on the slide, is that OP, you guys have been around for at least 120 years or so. I'd love maybe some quick thoughts from you on, while this is magnificent longevity and growth, and you also mentioned that you're also quite a diversified business. We'd like to understand a little bit more about what this had to do with OP perhaps even embracing automation to begin with. We know that sometimes what comes with rich history and longevity, it can be process debt, technical debt, legacy in general. What's the connection here, if there is one?
Yes, definitely. This technology and process depth and the huge variety of legacy solutions and software in place, I think it was a massive factor in us adopting process automation tools. And I think it also was one of the major reasons why we've had such success with robotic process automation now, and now with attended automation. And of course, while we are as a larger organization focusing on replacing the legacy software, I think process automation tools offer us the chance to deliver value in the short term. So I don't think that the need for RPA and other like stopgap solutions won't go away even with modern software, but the amount of legacy systems definitely increase the need for it.
As I talk on mute, okay, we know this always happens in webinars. Thank you for that. I think it's just honestly an honest answer and a relevant one as to what some of the drivers are. We'll come back to one of those themes about value a little bit later, but would love to go and talk a little bit more about your process journey. So because when you were describing your role, Jukka, you mentioned that you oversee the entire robotics program for OP. So just to be very clear about that, that's inclusive of unattended automation, as well as more recently, you've added attended or RDA into the mix. I'd love for you to walk us through a bit of the journey with some color commentary on what got you started with unattended, and then why did you see fit to eventually layer in attended automation? How did that all flow?
Yeah, so as with I think many other companies, our process automation journey began with kind of POC projects in different areas with unattended automation in 2015. But quite soon, I think we realized that in order to leverage process automation on a large scale, we need to have the resources and processes of managing the solutions as well in-house. So in the beginning, we started working as a part of our lean development organization, which I think served us really well, since I think the two aspects of process development through lean methodology and process automation, they're really tightly connected to each other. But since then we have grown, and I think the variety of processes we work with has also grown, and so we started realizing that we will need more options to really deliver value to the variety of our business processes. So we needed to expand our toolkit. And in 2018 and 2019, we started expanding it with business process management tools and desktop automation solutions as well. And like you can see there our automation toolkits consists also of OCR tools and AI. We are not solely responsible for the development of those platforms, but I think that they are an integral part of enabling new business cases, enabling new value to our business areas.
Thank you for that, Jukka. I would point out, just on riffing briefly off your automation toolkit approach, back to that point about that blog Phil and I put out, RPA is dead, log live integrated automation platforms. Part of our point there, and as I stated earlier, is that we know that you can get value from each of the tools, but you can enhance your value by combinations, by a toolkit approach such as this. So it's an interesting illustration of that point. So I want to just, Jukka, I wanted to probe just a little bit more on the addition of attended into, I'll use your terminology as well, which is I think you phrased it as well, as the addition of attended to your toolkit. But just, I'd love a little bit more on why you felt you needed both, and as well as, are they the same vendor, and what are you actually using attended for? Just give us a bit more color about why bringing attended in was a necessary complement.
Sorry, Elena, I have to mute myself a little bit. There's an announcement going on here. Just a moment.
Okay, no worries at all. Well, we just give Yuka a little bit of airtime there. We'll point out that one of the interesting things that he's done here is that as he's added in, so I believe that the RDA journey started in 2019 or so, and then that's part of as we push into 2020, I'll just underscore the focus on the RDA scale and then continued growth with that automation toolkit. I think that continues to be one of our core themes that we're finding from working with enterprises, talking with vendors and such, that it's never going to be a one tool show. It's very much about what's the evolution and how can you optimize the array of tools in your toolkit, get them working well together rather than in a piecemeal fashion that helps you achieve the greatest results. Yuka, let me know if you're able to chime in. Otherwise, I'll move on.
I'm able to talk now. It's the wonders of working from the office, since we are now able to work at the office. So I thought that it would be easier to talk here, but it seems that there's some issues here as well.
Okay. In any case, what I was hoping to get from you was a bit more color about why you deemed it important to layer Attended into your automation strategy. Is it the why both? Is it the same vendor? And what are you using Attended for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think the basic reason for adopting both RPA and attended automation comes from practical experience. We have been utilizing Blue Prism for RPA with great success, but we also found that trying to fulfill all of the different needs with RPA is going to lead to unsatisfactory results. So in 2018, 2019, we started looking at NICE's attended automation, which offered us a way of filling the automation gap in processes where we need, for example, near instant response times or the ability to automate tasks on the user desktop. And one of the key drivers for this was our contact center operations. But I think that attended automation can offer quite a lot of new ways of delivering value elsewhere as well.
Interesting, Yuka. So Attended, in my own experience and research, we continue to see the contact center, call handling, enabling the agents, making them more nimble as one of the core value propositions there. Any quick comments on other areas where you think Attended can be very useful?
I think it really depends on the business processes. We are focusing on the contact center, but there's been, for example, like AML, where we need to look at a variety of information based on a customer when we do the analysis. That's one area where we could probably utilize attended automation to great success as well. But I think that it boils down to the requirements of the process. So I wouldn't rule out anything, but definitely the customer-facing areas are the ones which probably benefit the most from attended automation.
Got it. Thank you for those thoughts there. And I'd actually like to bring in my colleague, Melissa O'Brien. At HFS, Melissa is our specialist in all things front office, but within that contact center. Melissa, I brought up one of your slides that speaks to some of the reinvention of customer experience, but what some of the things are that are going on in the front office that are particularly relevant to contact center. I'd love you to give us some quick thoughts on what are some of the major trends that you see in contact center, and where do you think attended automation fits within this vision?
Sure, happy to. So of course, the biggest thing that's new in contact center is this rapid shift to work from home, which happened in March for most organizations. And now we're shifting into a work from anywhere world. So this has caused a lot of pain for some organizations. And I think contact center is probably one of the most disrupted business areas, arguably the most. But it's also forcing a lot of the transformation that companies have been talking about for years, but not necessarily getting done quickly. So whether that's experimenting with work from home, shifting contact center in the cloud, adopting attended automation, tackling security challenges now that we're in a remote setting. These things are not little test cases anymore, but really imperatives for a lot of organizations to be able to service their customers and ultimately stay in business, right? So one way to visualize an optimized and digitally enabled customer engagement strategy is what we're looking at here. And it's a simplistic kind of 3-step process. So CX, as we know, is all about engaging customers and the way that they want to engage. And now that's becoming the same for employees, especially in this virtual environment. So leveraging what we've talked about around automation, part of what we call our AAA trifecta also includes smart analytics, and ultimately getting rid of the mundane work, the repetitive and unintelligent interactions to unleash people and let them do the things that people are good at. So in the contact center, that's connecting with your customers and making an impact on that engagement. So in the first step, just trying to eliminate things that aren't valuable. So can you mine your data to figure out where the points of friction are in your processes, which aren't necessarily in the interactions, but those that you can eliminate the interactions that have no value to your customers. So whether that means fixing errors in billing to eliminate people that are calling about things that are that can be resolved without an interaction. And then the next step is where you can use automation and AI to automate stuff intelligently. Sometimes that's low value or really repetitive. And then what's left is leaving the high value interaction and engagement for the humans. So while this might get a bit smaller in terms of volume, it's that much more important because this is where people are really connecting. There's elements of empathy. There's opportunities for generating loyalty or cross-sell and upsell. And that's kind of really where people are able to connect and employees and customers are actually interacting in this virtual world in a meaningful way.
Cool. Thank you for that perspective, Melissa. I've always, I almost regard contact center agents and leaders, they're almost like the teachers of the business world, which is sometimes definitely appreciated, sometimes not the most well compensated individuals, but they do such a hard job. And so much about the technology and what you just articulated is about helping to make them more effective at their jobs. Which reminds me, something that you alluded to is that we know you're also our research lead for what we call at HFS Digital Associates, which is our terminology for essentially for cognitive chatbots. But where do you think these cognitive chatbots or digital associates fit in the context of the contact center and our conversation today?
Yeah, I'll just point out that the terminology is intentional. We're making a distinction here because chatbots have come a long way and they're continuously evolving. So with these digital associates, or we're putting in the qualifier of intelligent or cognitive chatbot, it's because I think people got what I call chatbot fatigue with some poorly designed tools that were supposed to be conversational, but ended up being roadblocks and causing greater frustration. And so that's something that has improved significantly with the right kind of design. And that's why we have AI in here in the second step, because what we don't want is some kind of glorified FAQ and things that cause problems with customers. What we want is to enable good communication and good experiences. So there are a few things that we look for now in these conversational tools. They're more frequently tend to be chat focused, but there's also some increasingly intelligent IVR tools. And there's lots of different flavors. In the spirit of our integrated automation discussion, if there are pieces of AI and analytics present within these automation tools, we do look for those capabilities, whether that's around NLP, natural language processing and understanding, is the person interacting with them actually able to do so fluidly? Is there contextual awareness and the ability to shift or escalate to a person if applicable? Does it integrate with the right enterprise systems? Can it use data for insight and analysis? So these are just a couple of the capabilities that come to mind that we're seeing as a differentiator with more advanced tools. And one thing I want to call out also is that these tools are being used not just in customer-facing situations, but across the enterprise, whether that's in HR for onboarding. We've seen examples of procurement assistance, but the one more relevant to our conversation today is behind the scenes to help out contact center agents, help them find the information they might need, figure out the next best action, or navigate across so many different systems that they have to work with, and just otherwise help to, again, optimize that experience that we're talking about in step 3.
Got it. Perfect, Melissa, and nicely supported by the charts there as well. Because that was the part that I was really thinking about, which is you think of them, and it's even kind of in the sort of popular colloquial name of chatbot, that it implies that it's customer facing and somehow aligned with chat. But so much of this tech is being aligned to that third step, as you outlined, which is helping optimize both the customer experience, but also optimizing how you get the work done. And with that in mind, Odette, I'd love to turn over to you. So I know, all right, so you're obviously with NICE, so representing your firm in the software community today. But NICE itself, you offer attended and unattended automation, but your sweet spot is really attended, and you've got loads of really strong use cases in contact center operations. And so I know as part of your product evolution, you've created your own concept of what honestly looks very much like a digital associate to us, called NEVA, which is actually an acronym, I believe. Keep me honest here, Odette, but I'm pretty sure it stands for NICE Employee Virtual Attendant. That's NEVA, and she's got a rockin' hairstyle. But I'd love for you to chime in and tell us a bit more about NEVA and the role. I can't help but call her a she, but I suppose she's gender fluid. But the role that NEVA is playing, and how NEVA or a tool like this can help actually engage and enable agents in the contact center context.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we envisioned NEVA, it's basically we took the existing technology that we had and we just added a friendly face to it. And it goes to something you mentioned at the beginning around the automation anxiety, where it shouldn't be the case in attended automation. But when we came in and we spoke about RPA on the desktop, immediately people got frustrated and the adoption rate wasn't that high. And we thought if we'll give it a friendly name and we'll create it to be more of a personal assistant like Siri, like Alexa, like these sort of virtual attendant, then the adoption would be easier, and that proved to be a great success. But this is not, or NEVA is not a chatbot. If you think of it like you refer to as a digital associate, she is so much more than that. The chat capability, NLP, and so on, is just really, really the tip of the iceberg. The idea here is an actual virtual assistant that you can ask question and she would go and fetch the relevant data. But you also mentioned the beginning that RDA or attended automation is triggering an automation from the desktop. Again, this is just a very basic way to think of desktop automation. Is the employee is doing something, he presses a button and he sends it to the unattended robot. You have it on the bottom left side of RPA orchestration, and it's one of the things that NEVA is doing. But the key capability for desktop automation is the real-time aspect. Is that robot is moving from being reactive to proactive. Is the ability of the desktop robot, NEVA in our case, to monitor the screen in real time, identify the process, and then in real time optimize, either by providing guidance or by taking repetitive mundane tasks and doing them, so releasing the employee to do more cognitive work. The reason it's so relevant to contact center, first and foremost, come from the real-time nature of it. Yuka said it, that when they were looking to do process automation in real time, the unattended RPA was not fitting their needs. Contact center is all about real time, right? When you call the contact center, the processes should be executed there and then by the CSR, the service representative. You're not going to wait as a customer for him to do something asynchronically later. So process execution happen all the time in the contact center, and therefore this is the biggest need for real-time process automation on the desktop of the employees. And the entire notion is employee focused. Let's enhance their capability. Let's boost their capability. As Melissa mentioned, next best action. Let's bring them the right data in the right time. Let's take away the repetitive and mundane tasks so they can be focused on conversation, empathy, providing service, all these sort of things that eventually boost performance of front office employees.
Thank you for that, Oded. I mean, just to underscore a part of the point that Melissa made, and I think you've articulated and expanded on it beautifully, we're not just talking a chat bot here that's aligned to the world of facts. And I think that you've outlined that there's just a variety of rich functionality here, but so much of it aligned towards making employees more effective. If I just briefly harken back to the one office model that I mentioned earlier in the webinar today, as we've evolved our one office model since when we originally introduced it in 2016, originally it was squarely focused on breaking down the internal silos to better support customers. That remains wildly relevant, but something that an additional element that the pandemic has really brought to light is the importance of employee experience. And this just hits squarely to that, unleashing your people, unleashing your humans so that they can do a better job, so that there's both satisfaction, career pathing, and all those very necessary realities, but also enhancing the ability to better support the customers as well, or partners, or however broad you want to make the ecosystem. So really relevant points. I'd love to complement some of your points, Oded, and go back to you, Yuka. Just, I always like to get the readout on, Oded made some very specific comments about NEVA and some of the benefits of attended automation. I'd love to hear if this truly reflects your experience and OP's experience in getting attended automation up and running. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. The way we see attended automation is that it enables us to free the time of our customer service agents and people elsewhere to focus on the things they really excel at. So that all that human interaction and decision making processes that would probably be outside of the scope of automation. And regarding the adoption of attended automation, I think that while RPA and attended automation are to an extent technically quite similar, in practice there's a lot of differences that are both a benefit and of course a challenge as well. So just having the process on the user desktop, it offers us a lot of possibilities, for example, through better response times, virtual assistants, automated triggers based on legacy systems, and that's something that would be really difficult to achieve with RPA, at least on a larger scale. And this also, of course, poses a challenge as well, since we do need to put much more work into user experience in our development. So we also have to be able to run the processes on the user desktop without disturbing the agents too much. So that's something that we don't usually need to consider when we lift something from a process and run it on the back end. But we do need to really pay attention to that user experience when we are doing attended automation.
Thank you, Yuka. I think that's such an important point about how, while attended and unattended are, the technology is similar, but the broader, some of the processes and considerations that you need to take into account to make each of them work to their optimal advantage are a bit different. I want to just quickly turn to, we've had of some of the questions coming in through the Q&A. There was an interesting question that I think kind of fits in here, which is around citizen developers. This has been a program where the concept of, loosely the concept of citizen developers are folks that are not part of the IT organization, but sit within the business, but that can take on development responsibilities as they pertain to different permutations of process automation, for example, for developing RPA scripts and what have you. But I found that there can be some confusion as well about, well, hold on, if you're doing attended automation and it means that everyone has, like your contact center agents have attended on their desktop, are they citizen developers? We'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Yuka.
They are not citizen developers just by having attended automation on their desktops. I think citizen development is something that's going to be really interesting in the near future, and we are looking at it quite closely and doing some pilot projects regarding citizen development. And I think that it is really important to develop our capabilities there as well, since like most companies, we also run quite a lot on Excel macros and other things that are basically citizen development, but that needs to happen, I think, in the future in a more controlled and more managed manner. So that's something that's really interesting in the near future.
Well, thank you for that. And that's exactly the distinction that I was thinking that you would make, because it's been, again, one of the, as we try and dispel myths and rumor and such, that citizen development, it's not just unleashing the world to develop whatever the heck they want. It's anytime I've seen it work and be done with effect, it's because it's got substantial governance that's baked into it. So citizen development programs are distinctly different than using attended automation, which is typically done very much in alignment with how you outlined, Jukka, which is capabilities that are increasingly baked into the processes that, in this case, your contact center agents are leveraging, and then tying back to some of what Oded was talking about, that there is functionality that they can call on as well to assist them. They are not developing per se. Okay, super. Another sort of good, very hearty clarification there. Let's talk about, I want to just spend a moment, Jukka, and talk about, this is a quote from one of our earlier conversations, but one of the things that I mentioned it in some of my earlier comments in our webinar today, it's this notion of, is process automation, is RPA transformational? And so sometimes it gets a bad rap, and sometimes even at HFS, we've made that point that if you're not taking the opportunity to really change or reinvent your processes, sometimes RPA can just be perceived as a Band-Aid. And so I asked you that question, and you had this very interesting answer, which is the quote that's up on the screen, which is something, I'll paraphrase, but something along the lines of, you can't be too precious about whether it's transformational or not when it's really delivering useful value to your enterprise. But I'd love some quick thoughts for you, maybe to complement the quote that's up on the screen, which is just essentially, what are your thoughts on the value that process automation brings to OP? What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the power of robotic process automation and attended automation in general is in the ability to enable large-scale value on the short term. I don't think that it should necessarily be the preferred solution in most cases. So we want to, of course, develop more robust, more like long-term solutions. But solving all of the lingering issues in all of the different business processes, that's just usually not feasible through large-scale development, at least in the short term. So process automation tools, they offer us the way of working with a variety of systems without having to actually change the ways they work, and to do it with relatively small costs and shorter lead times. It offers us a way of not having to wait years for something that can be done right now. And it enables us humans to spend our time with something more valuable than doing routines that don't really create value to our customers. And they are temporary solutions in most cases, and we celebrate the fact that the robots that we've done a few years ago, they are heading to retirement, and that's great. That means that our processes are developing in a way that we don't need that robot anymore. But it also means that we need those processes running in the meanwhile.
100%. And thank you for that, Jukka. I really wanted to make sure to ask that question, because I acknowledge that sometimes we can get hung up on, is it transformative? And while that is important, because there is a heck of a lot of process and technical debt that's out there, making sure you're getting value from your program is really what the name of the game is. And again, it's products of the pandemic. This is more important than ever. Odette, I'd love you to weigh in on this. I mean, you work with OP Financial Group, but you work with lots of other customers. What's been your experience with this same point about the value of process automation? What do you think?
I think, and the discussion I like having with my customers is less around whether it's transformative or not, and more whether it's strategic. What is your business agenda? What is your strategy? And how can process automation drive that strategy to fruition? Because a lot of customers have treated robotics as something very tactical. They had a small problem in a back-end process around finance, HR, etc., and they bought 3-4 robots, and they brought a service provider to automate that specific process, and they were happy. And a year later, they said, wait a minute, this is not impressive. This is very underwhelming. 1-2 robots doing something very small. I wasn't able to scale my robotic journey. Whereas customers who treated it strategically, like OP and like few of our other customers, and build a COE and build a roadmap and start analyzing their business priorities and what do I need in the back end, what do I need in the front end, what do I need in real time, what do I need non-real time, what is my priority? If my priority is driving customer experience, it's improving the front office, really contact center, I probably need attended automation. How can attended automation help? So only when you think of it as strategically and from the business need, these are the successful customers who saw scale and got great ROI. And customers who didn't think of it strategically didn't. And again, strategically doesn't have to be very long-term, 5-year transformation. You can drive a lot of strategic value, relatively short, near-term, like OP did, but you still need to think of it based and align it to your business strategy and not as something tactical to patch a hole.
Yep, I'm with you, Odette. It makes a lot of sense. That alignment is very, very critical. And again, as I mentioned, it's something that's going to become, is and has become even more relevant. All right, let's close this out by just quickly, Yuka, I'd love, because for all the value and such that we're talking about, let's actually talk about what you've achieved. I'd love you to take just a moment and walk us through some of what OP has managed to achieve with its process automation program.
Definitely. Process automation has been a great success for OP. In our 4 years of operating as the Center of Excellence for Process Automation, we have delivered almost 400 automated workflows, which then again have delivered over 40 million euros worth of cost savings through FTE savings, as well as other methods such as direct cost savings. So we try to measure savings and the benefits of process automation on a wider perspective, such as analyzing customer time savings as well. So that's for us a method of measuring the direct customer facing benefits of process automation. We also, of course, have found great benefits, for instance, in compliance, process standardization, etc. So robotics, attended automation, they've been used in a great variety of processes here at OP, and we are really happy with the way things have gone over the years. We are currently in the process of forecasting 2021, but I think that we are in the near future expecting to grow even a little bit faster than in the last 2 years. So just based on the backlog of different processes we have right now, we're probably looking at an over 100 automated workflows per year, and attended automation is probably going to be around 10% of that. So attended automation is still in the growing stages at OP, but we definitely see it as an investment to the future.
Super, thank you for that, Yuka. I was going to ask a clarifying question about what slice of this is attended, but thank you. You self-served on that one. But just to harkening back to some of my points at the beginning, when I talked about that pre-pandemic sort of anemic 13% of enterprises with skilled process automation programs, part of the point of this whole discussion today is to shine a light on attended as a very viable component of that helps you expand the program. And Yuka, it's a simplistic view of what you just said, but that's definitely part and parcel of what we're hearing. Okay, so just wrapping up now, we'll take about a minute to do this, and then we'll hit a couple of quick questions. I'd love to do what I call the lightning round, which is to our esteemed panelists today. I'd love you to briefly summarize your best tangible takeaway for our delegates today about why they should consider attended automation as part of their overall automation and broader digital business strategy. But Yuka, I'd love to start with you, please.
I think the main takeaway should be that attended automation enables completely new business cases and to deliver value in ways that are really out of reach with more traditional RPA solutions. So it enables us to scale automation in the areas that require, for instance, fast response time, like I mentioned earlier, and really scaling to hundreds or maybe even thousands of users simultaneously. So that's something that we really look at when we look at utilizing attended automation.
Super, thank you, Yuka. Oded, let's go over to you. What do you think? Best tangible takeaway for the case for attended automation?
I think that attended automation is really dependent on the maturity of the automation journey. Once you understand that a pure RPA, unattended RPA have a lot of value, but have a glass ceiling, that's the moment you start thinking of what next. This is RPA is dead. This is the new RPA. Everyone have a different take on it, but it's the toolkit. You need to look at the end-to-end needs and understand that attended automation is enabling use cases that just unattended cannot. And if you want to bring automation that will drive your business value, not your automation needs, eventually you'll hit use cases that fit attended automation. And then you can have a best of suite approach by taking a vendor that gives you both attended automation and unattended and process discovery and AI, or take a best of breed approach and take from different vendors. The most important thing is to understand that if you think of automation strategically, then you need to expanding your automation toolkit, exactly as OP did.
Wonderful, thank you for that, Oded. Melissa, I'd love to pop over to you for some final thoughts.
Yeah, I would say because, particularly if it's designed well, it will actually help break down the silos in an organization, like we talk about in our one office concept. And that's, it's actually really a win-win for customer and employee experience. And I think, hearing Yuka talk about the business outcomes that OP Financial Group gleaned out of these initiatives, I think that's proof in the pudding that that this stuff actually has an impact on business outcomes and financials.
100%. Thank you for that insight, Melissa. And then I'll just quickly add the one piece that I think I've heard in addition. I sort of made the point already about it can help you sort of in line with what Oded was alluding to, is that by expanding your toolkit, it enables you to do more, and it opens that aperture of potential. Where can this be used, and helps with the scale protocol. But in addition to that, I'd layer in, this actually also helps unleash people back to that employee experience element that we talked through a bit. But there is also that element that Yuka, you referred to, and Oded, you certainly did, and as well, I guess all of you did, but the idea that the way that attended works, it's so clearly designed to help. It removes some of that stigma of the automation anxiety of, oh, this bot's stealing my job. No, the point is that it's enhancing your ability to do your job well. And I think that that's definitely something very positive for the automation market. Okay, so we're a couple minutes over time here, so I'm not going to belabor the questions, but for those of you who are willing to spend another minute or two with us, I would like to give one question to the group here that we hit on the citizen developer one, which I think was very important, but there's also an interesting question about the maintenance requirements of attended versus unattended. And Yuka, I was wondering if you might want to share any thoughts on that. You spoke briefly about some of the differences between standing up the programs and considerations. Is there anything notable about the maintenance involved for either of them? What do you think?
I think that there is like I mentioned before, we need to put much much more effort into developing the user experience, and due to the wide variety of users when doing attended automation on a large scale, it also means that there's probably going to be a wider variety of issues that the users coming into contact with. So you do need to resource that maintenance, but I don't think that it's something that would require a lot more resourcing, for example. But you kind of need to allocate that when you're doing live proofing and testing with the users. So you definitely need to consider that, but it's not been a showstopper for us.
Got it. Thank you for that. Oded, anything to add there?
No, for the sake of time, I think Yuka covered it brilliantly. You need to think of the people and do the change management, but that's kind of the bigger thing.
Okay, that's super. Okay, I know we're about 5 minutes over now, so I think that we will, for any questions we didn't get to, we'll review and make sure to follow up. But with that, I would like to give a hearty thank you to my panelists today, Yuka from OP Financial Group, Oded from NICE, and our very own Melissa O'Brien from HFS. Thank you so much, everybody. And to all of our delegates, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.